then is the seller of surrogacy? Who are the surrogate mothers? Logically speaking, of course, these are very poor women. This started in the United States in the 70s, and it's still very big there. In the United States, a lot of surrogate mothers are army wives, so their husbands are, for example, in Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere else, and they are at home, just working, being pregnant. After that, we have women in the poor countries of the world. A lot of them don't know how to read and write, and very often it's their husband that says that you should become a surrogate so you can earn money for the family. So we're talking here about very big inequalities, of course. When surrogacy is being explained as a kind of right to have children, we have to remember that this right is not for everyone. Nobody's speaking about women from sub-Saharan Africa who can't get pregnant because of diseases that you maybe are able to cure in the West. Nobody's speaking about their right to have children. When we hear in surrogacy context about the right to have children, we have to remember this only refers to the right of the global upper class. Now, how did surrogacy start? It started in the United States in the 70s, and it's very interesting to note why it started just then. Because we're dealing with a history of how the upper classes, when they are not able to have children, have always resorted to the lower classes to have children for them. And that is what adoption always has been about. Adoption has never been about rich people having children for poor people. Adoption is always about poor people having children for rich people. So this used to be the case. In the United States, of course, it used to be adoption within the country. It used to be so that a lot of young girls who got pregnant, who were not married, had to give up the child for adoption. So maybe they couldn't afford to have a child, or simply the shame of being a single mother when the guy who got them pregnant didn't want to marry them was too big. So they then gave up the child for adoption. That way, the desire of the upper classes to have children was satisfied. What happened in the 70s? Abortion. So when abortion became a right, of course, the supply of babies then disappeared. All of a sudden, there weren't so many babies just born ready to give up for adoption. So what then happened was that these upper class couples said, either we will go to adopt a child from Korea or from Guatemala or from somewhere else in the world. But there was some who said, we don't want a child that looks different. We want a child that looks like us. So some men started putting ads in the papers saying, is there some woman who can get pregnant for us? We offer you $10,000 if you give up your child for adoption for us. This was still happening in the kind of a legal sense. It was not legal and it was not illegal either. It was something like in between. There were no laws about it. So some women, of course, replied to these ads, got inseminated, got pregnant, and then gave up the children for adoption. Of course, this being the United States, very soon big industries got in, realizing that we can make a lot of money from this. Because of course, what is more important for people than to have children? This is like one of the most basic things. So if we can make money from this, we can make a lot of money. So they then started putting together young, fertile, poor women with rich couples wanting to have children. Back then, there was only heterosexual surrogacy. There was no talk then about gay men. So what then happened was these industries started growing. They started putting ads on TV. They started putting ads in the paper. It became a big thing. Until some scandals started coming up in the mid-'80s in the US. And these scandals were often about women who changed their mind after they gave birth. Because of course, they answered the ad, they went there, they got pregnant, but when they actually gave birth to the child and saw the child, some of these women said, wait, I want to keep this child. This is my child. I don't want to give it away. So of course, then there was big custody battles. There was one famous case called the Baby M case, where the woman had given birth and didn't want to give the child up. So there were even scenes when they were pulling at the child. The couple was saying, it's ours, and the woman was saying, no, it's mine. And it was going back and forth like that. And the woman escaped to another state, and the couple came after. And it became even a soap opera in the US out of this thing. So after this case, a lot of states in the US banned commercial surrogacy. But then something happened that changed not only the way that courts ruled, but also the geographical nature of the surrogacy industry. And that is when they started using embryo transplantation. So this now meant that a woman could give birth to a child that didn't at all look like her. This meant, first of all, that if she then went to court and said, I want to keep my child, the court said, the child is not yours because it doesn't look like you. You could have a black mother who gave birth to a Japanese child, and the court would say, but look at the child, it's not yours. Also, what this meant was that couples from the West could go to places like India and pay 1/3 of the cost that they would pay in the United States for an Indian woman to have that child, and get a white child from that woman. So of course they didn't want to adopt an Indian child because the first idea was to have a child that looked like them. But now they could pay for an egg from a white woman, put that egg into an Indian woman, and get a white child out. So that's how the industry started going to places like India and Thailand. So you have to keep in mind this is a very racist industry. It thrives on racist ideas. So the industry then started establishing itself all over the world. You have to keep in mind also how this works, how they do it. When a couple goes to India to have a child, very often they don't even meet the woman who's going to have that child. A lot of these women don't even know in what country their children are going to end up. So these women know they're having a child for a couple from the West, but they don't maybe even know what country their child is going to end up in. What the clinics will do is they will routinely implant 3 or 4 or 5 embryos in the woman to maximize the chance of success. You also need to know that there's a lot of hormones involved. So these women get a lot of injections every day, sometimes up to 25 injections. Because when you're dealing with embryo transplantation, it's a much more difficult procedure than just having insemination. So maybe if the woman does get pregnant with 4 children, the clinic will then abort 2 or 3, depending on how many the couple want. So, and of course this is all done without the woman's consent. The woman signs on the contract that she will agree to any medical procedure being done on her. And she then loses all the control over her own body. So it's not her that decides if she's going to have an abortion or not. Also, in the case that, because of course sometimes there is something wrong. The child might have Down syndrome or some other thing. What then happens is, on the contract, it is established that it's the couple who has the right to decide whether they want to keep the child or not. And very often the couple will say, no, we don't want a child that has Down syndrome or something like that. So they will decide that the woman should abort. So she again then loses the right over her own body because she's not carrying her own child. She's carrying the child of somebody else.